All right, peace and blessings, brothers and sisters. Once again, this is the Cosmocentric Mystic uh, with an interesting project for you. A few weeks ago, a friend of mine came to me and showed me a document that he said a friend of his gave to him. And this document was very interesting in that it detailed uh, methodically what happens in different states of meditation and trance. And, we were looking at it like, whoa, this is kind of dope. Like the US government knows about this information. They know about meditation. They know about trance. They're keeping it a secret. And so I got curious and I wanted to know where it came from. And so I did some searching and lo and behold, I came across um, information that there was a government-funded program called Stargate. I mean, it went through several different names before it became Stargate. It only became Stargate in 1991. Interestingly enough, 1994, I think it was, or 1990. Yeah, it was 1994 that the movie Stargate came out, which almost to the T kind of dealt with similar concepts. Not the same, but similar. So this was a government-funded program from 1972 to 1995. Over $20 million invested in the investigation of the weaponization of meditation and trance. Like, come on. So what ended up happening was U.S. government kind of found out what the Russians were doing with something experiments of psychic phenomenon behind the Iron Veil, something of that nature. I think that's what the book was called. And once the U.S. government found out everything that the Russians were doing, they wanted to get their own. They didn't want the Russians to have one up on them. And so they engaged in this exploratory program dealing with meditation and trance. One of their key findings was the viability of a practice called remote viewing. And we'll go through that a little later on in this presentation because I talk about it. But it's so just interesting. So this is going to be a series of videos. This first video is by far not going to be succinct in trying to explain everything the program was doing. But has more videos come about, hopefully you'll get some clarity on the aspects of the program. At the very least, be introduced to the fact that the government was involved in this type of research, and hopefully it validates the brothers and sisters that are walking the path of meditation and are running across people that do not support it. Not that we need to really engage these brothers and sisters because the path in and of itself validates itself. It's just interesting information, by and large. Just interesting information. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen with you. This is gonna be pretty brief considering the mammoth amount of work that's been done. But like I said, I'm gonna do a few videos and basically it'll be reports. I hope you enjoy. Let's get started. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen with you right now. This was a presentation I kind of got together, and let's just see. So Stargate, the weaponization of meditation and trance. In 1972, Russell Targ, this guy right here, submitted a grant application to the Jet Propulsion Laboratory at NASA with this guy, Harold Puthoff, as a co-investigator. And so, and interestingly enough, these people are still, engaged in psychic phenomenon. From 1972, it's 50, almost 50 years later, 40 years, 50 years later, whatever. And so they never stopped. They never stopped. They never stopped. They kept going. And so then from 1972 to 1995, it was run by the military, right up here up the street out of Fort Meade, Maryland. It was manned by military personnel. It was funded by the United States government, meaning that its budget went through Congress. Its budget was voted on by members of a congressional caucus or whatever, members of the Senate and everything, and passed. And it gave intel on operations that intelligence communities were involved in. I mean, detailed information. So, in 1995, the program, it was a Department of Defense program. But because of its controversial nature, it was transferred to the CIA. And then because at the time the CIA was under like heavy pressure, it was under heavy pressure. It launched an investigation into like whether or not they should keep it going. And so to do that, they enlisted the services of these two people, Ray Heyman and Jessica Utz. And so they investigated the program to see whether or not it was something that the CIA should continue. From their report, the CIA said that the intelligence gathered from remote viewing wasn't really viable for intelligence purposes. So now the program itself it focused on precognition, clairvoyance, and psychokinesis. So they engaged physics engineers to understand cognitive sciences. Now, of all of the different things that they were engaged in, remote viewing was their pride and joy. So now remote viewing is being able to see and look at objects that are a significant distance from you or out of your sight. You can't see them. And then see them correctly. So from 1972 to 95, this program was engaged in 504 separate government missions that the gathering agency took action on, meaning they came to these people and said to them, I need you to look at and see this, and a third. They did that, and that government agency took that information and acted on it. And almost 90% of the people returned for more information. I mean, it was 20-something odd years, 22, 23 odd years. They did 504 missions. What are we talking about? So we're looking at 25 missions a year or something like that, close to it. 22 missions a year over the course of their 20-year program that they were engaged. I mean, that's significant. That's very significant. And it's also saying that it's something that is viable. Human consciousness has the ability to see and to do way more than we understand it to be able to. Not we, but the Western world. Like, I'm already engaged in activities in which I understand some of its depth, but definitely not all. Now, from its inception, it was on shaky ground. Due to people just not believing in, what it is. It's, the West, they see this as wacky-dacky, like, who's going to be involved in this? So it went through a lot of different changes. Like, for instance, 1973, it was shut down in June and then picked back up in November. At first, it was called the Grilled Flame Program. Then in 1982, it was called Center Lane Activities. Then in 1984, the Secretary of the Army discontinued the project wanted to transfer it. 1985, it becomes Sunstreak, and then finally in 1991, it became the Stargate program. So it was never really something that was stable. It was always under attack because of the nature of the program. You know, people did not believe in it. You know, and so this program constantly had to produce results. So in the early 2000s, right, the CIA released documents about the program. Now you can go on the CIA website right now, type in Stargate, and look at all of these documents. I've done that, and it is mammoth. It is a lot of different documentation. And then you might have anecdotal notes that are like 1 or 2 pages, and then you have like these other documents that are between 300 to 600 pages long, and you're like, what in the mad world? You know, trying to go through these things, and then it's a lot of work. So anyway, there's already been research done on it, and it was broken down into 4 volumes. Volumes 1 and 2 dealt with remote viewing. Volume 3 was talking about psychokinesis, and Volume 4 is just reports of this, right? Now, interestingly enough, I'm hoping you can still see my screen. Here is an Amazon link, right? Clicking on this link, hopefully you can still see it. Look at the cost of this book. This book is $95. This is just volume, what volume is this? Volume 1. Hopefully you can see my screen. Let's see. Let's see here. Optimize for full screen video clip. I can't tell. I hope you can see this. And so, new share. Here we go. Well, I don't know what that was about. So we're just gonna keep going. I'll try to fix that. I'll see whether or not I can make that happen for you all. But so that's the link if you want. You can just go ahead and type that in and look it up yourself. Or go on Amazon, type in Stargate Archive, and you'll pull up the same information I did. Really wild. And then they made a movie about it, The Men Who Stare at Ghosts. That's so wild. And then looking at the movie and then looking at the documents, you see there was a lot of parallels. For instance, one of the torture methods that the program kind of discovered, which is funny, and that they showed in the movie, but you really had to know what was going on in order to catch it, was the fact that the Barney song for adults is torture. After being played over and over for 24 hours, it drives people insane. It's so funny. And then in the movie, there's a scene where there are like some Afghan or Middle Eastern prisoners locked in a cell, and for the briefest of moments, you hear the Barney song. Now, unless you know what that's about, it'll totally pass you over. But if you read the program, you'll know that that's one of the torture techniques that they came up with as a result of this program. The CIA, nonetheless. So there was a lot of oversight. There was the Department of Defense Steering Committee. There was the Department of Defense working groups that included officers from both the Department of Defense, the CIA, and the NSA, the National Security Council. There was an Army Science Monitoring Team. There was the Army Surgeon General. There's a Scientific Oversight Committee. I mean, there was a lot of people looking at this program because it was meditation. It was metaphysics. It was esoteric. It was talking about merging your consciousness with the consciousness of the earth in order to view activities taking place on earth. That's in one of the documents. It's like, you know, the West isn't really falling for that or going for that. And so there was a lot of there was people combing through all this information, trying to see if this program was valid. So some of the fallacies and facts. So they did not fortune tell, although there are some documents where you see people, you know, using tarot decks. in order to foretell the future. That's what some of the documents state. So it was not a CIA program. It was funded primarily by the Defense Intelligence Agency and the Army, since it was out of Fort Meade, Maryland, up here. There were 17 to 20 members at any given time. And then they developed protocols to validate findings. When it was transferred to the CIA, because the CIA had just gone through something called the Ames case, in which they had to do a lot of damage control, they felt that taking on such a controversial program at that time was something they didn't want to do. So that's why they launched the investigation to see if it was worth their time. Now, the research. Then in the documents, they constantly refer to SRI, SRI, SRI. SRI is the Stanford Research Institute. Stanford. So research focused on remote viewing has operationally viable. So their goals: identify people with the ability to do remote viewing, train them, have a training manual for them. We'll go over their training manual that they did develop, in which I now use some of the techniques in that training manual, and I see the benefits and I see the results of some of what it was doing. Of course, I haven't used it intensively and extensively, but I definitely see already some of the results of what they're doing. Certify people in this field, then categorize the different ways in which you do remote viewing, and then specialize in different types of sessions, come up with methods and ways of tracking and measure it, and incorporate it into the intelligence community. What they were trying to do is make it repeatable. And the nature of human consciousness and in spirituality in general is there's a subjectivity to it. You don't know the mechanisms that elicit these responses, not all of them. And so there's a little bit of subjectivity and error, hit or miss. And that's what the CIA really couldn't deal with. So some of the things that they did accomplish was they did establish a repeatable method of remote viewing, and that's what I have been engaged in a little bit. They did practical remote viewing applications, and they did have a testable model. That's pretty dope. So we'll go into, so that's the end of that presentation. I'll go into the program more in depth as the days go on. I'll try to get up a video at least once every 3 to 4 days with some new information. I'll break it down, relate it to you. Sometimes, we'll explore, and I'll go through the CIA website with you and show you how to get these documents yourself and just review it yourself. I mean, it's a ton of pages, a ton of documents. So very interesting, very interesting, very interesting. I'm not normally a conspiracy buff, but here's a conspiracy and an agenda right before us. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this presentation. Hope this kind of sparked you to go research a little bit yourself. Peace and blessings.